your last role was what?
Senior Vice President, Revenue Strategy with Aimbridge Hospitality. So I was, in the last 8 months of my career there, heading up their revenue management consolidated office or center within the company.
Yeah. And before I hit record, we started talking about a lot of hotels are trying to bring revenue, sales, and marketing together. You see titles of one person, chief commercial officer, and then those departments are rolling up. You see other titles. Sometimes you see sales out, or you see digital marketing out. But you said something interesting, and I'd like to get you to articulate it again. That, of course, I had been seeing this trend since 2019. I know it goes further back. You have seen it, you've watched it, and you've noticed something that I think everyone understands, but I don't think we talk about it that much.
It's that mind shift, right? And when commercial really started to take foothold, we all knew and understood, okay, commercial really is kind of this combination role. And what does it look like? And we started over the last couple of years, especially post-pandemic, putting it together and tying it together as to what the role actually looks like. Where the gap is today, in my opinion, is how do you execute those strategies? What are the day-to-day tasks? How do you bridge the gap between just doing or just focusing on revenue and that tactical revenue mindset, and then shifting to understand the bigger picture, the broader picture, and what do I do? Okay, I get it. I get the mindset. I get the shift. But what do I physically have to do to be successful in that role? And that's where we want to kind of try and tie in some of the gaps through that blog that you've been reading.
Yeah. What I find interesting is that, so I've never worked in a hotel. I've worked for hospitality technology vendors for the past 8 years or so. And there's a similar shift that's been happening within, SaaS companies, let's just say, other companies, but let's just stick with SaaS and hotels. Marketing departments are rolling up to a chief revenue officer, and the company is starting to see, well, yeah, because sales and marketing generate revenue, and they need to be working together. And it's and there's always been this sales and marketing like this. You have to, it helps to roll up to one person. It helps to share KPIs. Probably more importantly, it helps if marketing people understand what salespeople are trying to do and how they're doing it, at least to some degree, and vice versa. I mean, do you see the same thing within commercial teams?
I do see the same thing. Like in the hotel space, there is a space and time for a revenue manager. There is a space and time for directors of sales, and there is a space and time for that e-commerce manager. What you're looking at in that commercial space is who is in control of the whole picture, right? So a hotel has a budget for spend, and that could be money that they spend on sales salaries, money they spend on SEO or digital ads or things like that, money that they're spending on channels. Like you're spending money through distribution when you're buying in space on wholesale or anything like that. What's happened in the past is that has all been segmented out. Sales had this budget, digital had this budget. Nobody looked at the whole picture, right? And said, okay, well, within our market, there isn't space for group or negotiated. We're very much leisure or travel, and like we're very much wholesale. But we're spending all of this money on sales salaries and sales bodies when we should be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on digital marketing or partnering with incremental business through wholesale partnerships or things like that. So the money is being spent in the wrong areas, and you're not accomplishing the goals that need to be accomplished. So it's a matter of who's actually in control of that data. What is the data telling them, and how are you spending your money? That's what the commercial position is really kind of talking about. And so when you're looking at yourself and you're like, okay, well, I'm just a revenue manager. I'm used to having to control inventory and understand pricing and things like that. there's still a space for you, but you have to understand, do you want to continue in that space or do you want to bridge that gap into a different thinking process or mindset? And we've not really taught anybody how to do that. Right? How do you bridge that gap?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of the chief commercial officer or head of commercial for those departments. I'm trying to think of their titles before they did that. And
a lot of them in the current industry in the hotel space came from sales. It is in my experience, and I think we're seeing this more broadly across the scope now, is they're now the more successful ones are coming from a revenue background.
Yes, and that's where I was headed. Because and revenue people are so, I love revenue people because they're so different. They're so different.
The difference is the headspace is data driven only, right?
Yes.
And so that's why, like, one of my references in the blog, my very first writing, it recycle the box. You know, you've been in revenue management, you've been forced to think inside a box. You're very, very comfortable with that. We love rules, we love boundaries, all those things. And it's just a game that I always say, like words I always say, like, oh, I love a good rule. Like, I'm a good rule follower, but you got to kind of bust free of some of that space. But what the revenue team is doing is they're making fact database decisions. And what happens with sales is they tend to be a little more friendly or a little less aggressive. They want to make sure everybody's okay. These are all great qualifications of a sales leader, but not necessarily what you need to be in a commercial space, because you've got to make tough decisions. You've got to say no to the client. You got to have a hard conversation with your sales team about their true goals, not necessarily their individual goals. You got to be able to guide the revenue team into making certain particular strategies that maybe went against what they were used to or something they don't know how to do, right? And then there's always that owner space where you got to be able to go to the owner and provide facts and data to show that you need to make a change or a decision that could be very costly, right? So you're used to having that sales team, but I want you to take that $100,000 and put it over here. I don't know what's going to happen, but the data shows it could be good.
Yeah.
So you got to be able to kind of make those decisions like that. And I think that's why the revenue mindset has proven more successful in the commercial space.
Yeah. So there's the effort of collaboration, getting these people who are used to working in silos to just understand what's going on. Sharing KPIs. That's why I like, again, back to my analogy about software. You got to know where the spend is. And like hotels have underspent on digital marketing.
Dramatically.
Okay.
Hands on.
So that person that heads up commercial, are they going to address that? And how are they going to address that with the team, with the owner? How to make that shift from, I don't need 12 salespeople, I need 6. What I need is the tech and the spend on digital. And, I don't know how, and it's probably a hard argument within a hotel, don't you think?
It's exceptionally hard because it's very challenging to really provide a solid ROI. You can go in and you can say, well, I had this many clicks. What does that even mean? How did that even transpire? I had this many impressions, but what does that actually mean? And I think some of the challenge is really digging down and finding the right data points, right? One of the pre-questions you kind of asked is tech stack. Do you have the right tech stack? And I think this is where we miss the mark in the hotel space, right? There are some fantastic tech companies out there, just some fantastic ones. And we're resistant to spend $2,000 a year on a piece of tech, right? We're not really sure if there's a great ROI behind it. In my opinion, you should have multiple tech stacks. You should have multiple, right? You should have not just, the industry's biggest known piece, but maybe the biggest up and comer as well. And what are the 2 different pieces showing you, and how can you kind of go after something a little bit more unique or different? And in those elements, they're going to show you where you're driving your business, right? So if you're suddenly spending money on chasing loyalty business, you should be improving your loyalty share by X percentage. And it should be an agreed upon goal. Okay, we're going to spend $50,000 to improve loyalty, but we need loyalty to go up X percentage points in order for that to be valuable and be measuring against that spend. And a lot of times you just don't see that. You're like, okay, well, just throw $500 a month at travel ads. We all love throwing $500 a month at travel ads, but what that does is it just shifts that it shifts that business out of Booking.com or out of Priceline into Expedia or whatever it is. It doesn't really drive additional value-rated business to your hotel, and it's costly. So it's kind of, how do you tell that story or tell that piece of that story to an ownership to be able to spend it? And how many data sources are you using? You don't need all of them, but you need more than one.
Yeah. Everybody I talk to that runs a commercial team tells me the same thing, is that their tech stack is siloed and their data is everywhere and it's fragmented, and they spend hours each week and hours pulling it together to try to make some sense of it.
So you have like, just at a simple branded hotel, you're looking at like a Marriott hotel. You have 5 or 6 different system options just at Marriott, right? And then you have a BI tool, and then you have maybe a group tool, and then you have maybe a market insight tool, right? All of those within themselves have their own elemental reports you're pulling together. There are very few companies now, if any, that can really pull them all together into one space, fully automated, which is, another piece of this is automate everything humanly possible. Because most of your revenue team right now is spending like 70% of their time just running reports. Right? Why are we even doing that? That's like no value. It's 2024. There's automation everywhere. How can you buy into a piece of that? And I think this is a space that you'll see make a change. I was just on with a SaaS company this past week and just kind of talking about what are some of the challenges that the hotels face that are still not there yet. And a lot of that is around this commercial dashboarding, right? Because commercial dashboarding isn't just about how the business is doing from a top line perspective. You got to tie in profit. Almost nobody is bringing in that profit. There's only one real kind of tool out there bringing in profit. So how are you looking at that piece? And then there's not a lot of transparency within the brand space to provide you with that cost analysis for all of those brand and loyalty bookings either. So thought that a lot, in my last couple of months, kind of working on some owner advisory boards and things like that, just saying, hey, how do I get you to be more transparent with me so my commercial dashboards actually work and I can make better decisions? And so there's tons and tons and tons of data, nothing really fully aggregated yet in that commercial space. So it'd be interesting to see what develops in the next 3 years. Yeah,
I heard the same thing last week, the very same thing about profitability. Yeah, I believe. So I've also heard that, some hotels and I'm not usually talking to big brands. I'm usually talking to management groups, and they're bringing on data analysts to tackle some of that, right? I also believe that the industry vendors need to do a better job of bringing forth expertise to help their clients leverage their tools, pull that data, push it into a dashboard, whatever it is that the commercial team needs, even collectively. Just like if you're a revenue management system, what are you doing for the sales group? If you're a CRS, what are you doing for the marketing department? I think that's how they ought to be thinking. Yeah, that's pretty genius. That's pretty genius. And hey, what would be better than a great QBR? Like a QBR that actually resulted in something when you're meeting with a vendor that had a greater goal in mind for something. So like one of the things that you talked about was, these silos and shared KPIs, and it goes right to this vendor statement that you just said is we're not cross-training enough. And so our vendors aren't cross-trained enough. Our people aren't cross-trained enough. And so it's not creating this space. Yeah. We got some work to do. A lot of work. It's great that we've all accepted it. Yeah. Right? It took forever to get to a point where we're like, okay, we need to accept commercial into our souls. Now, how do we execute commercial, and where are those gaps, and how do we start filling those gaps?